Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another Halloween horror review. This time, we're going to be taking a look at kind of a different type of horror. This is a subject that we've touched on a few times in the past with some other stories, but today I have two, possibly three particular movies I wanted to talk about. With all the fun I've been having with the sort of Mayan prophecy, the end of the world coming in December, and jokingly calling this the final Halloween and such. Yeah, for those of you who are wondering, no, I don't actually believe in the Mayan prophecy. I was just having a little bit of fun. You can relax. I'm not a conspiracy nut, anything like that. No, far from it. But I thought, hey, I do enjoy a good post-apocalyptic story. I mean, I did talk about all the fun I had playing Fallout 3, for example, and it's a genre of movie that I've always enjoyed, and Lord knows there's quite a few out there. I mean, you got the old Mad Max type, of course, which often filmed in deserts with cars with spikes and guns attached to them, and raiders fighting other raiders and stuff like that. I mean, there's a ton of movies like that, but and that's certainly a genre that's fun. But today I thought we'd talk about sort of the more serious side of the genre and some of the more serious films of that genre that have come out over the years. In particular, there's a double feature movie pack that was sent to me by YouTube viewer Go to the Rats quite some time ago. And I recently checked out both movies on here and then checked them out again just the other night with some friends because I thought they were, a lot of fun and definitely worth sharing. So this is from MGM's Midnight Movies collection, a collection of 100 movies, primarily of the horror and drive-in variety with some sci-fi thrown in as well. While these aren't strictly horror, I do consider the end of the world a horrific concept, and one that can certainly be quite scary. Now, are these films quite scary? Well, they are a bit dated. I mean, they are from the early to mid-'60s, but they're definitely worthy of note as, respectable entries into the genre, and also worthy of note in that they're kind of some of the earliest entries into the genre. I'm, of course, talking about the MGM Midnight Movies double feature of Vincent Price in The Last Man on Earth, the first ever adaptation of Richard Matheson's novel I Am Legend, and Ray Milland in Panic in Year Zero. And there's another one that I'm going to talk about as well, which unfortunately is not available on DVD here. It did have a brief VHS release in the mid-'80s, but we'll talk about that one at the end. So yeah, post-apocalyptic horror today on the Multimedia Chronicles. Welcome back. Well, I guess first off, we'll talk about The Last Man on Earth, starring Vincent Price. As I mentioned in the intro, it is, of course, the first time that Richard Matheson's classic novel, I Am Legend, was ever brought to the screen. The second adaptation was, of course, Charlton Heston in The Omega Man, which is a lot of fun as well. Both of them are quite different adaptations. I guess we'll talk about this one a little bit, too, over here. Both of them are quite different adaptations. Some would argue that the Will Smith version is the most faithful. Yes and no. I mean, all three versions contain elements that are familiar to fans of the novel. I myself have not read the novel, but I would say from what I know about it, The Last Man on Earth is the one that kind of gets some of the core elements the closest to the original. For example, one of the things that is explained in Last Man on Earth that I don't think is really explained in any of the other versions is where the title comes from, where the whole I Am Legend thing comes from. Why is he considered a legend? Well, that's explained in Last Man on Earth, and the explanation for that is quite disturbing and horrific and tragic and ironic and just wonderful. And so what can I say? I don't know why the other versions just kind of bypass that, because it's such a key element of the story, and just a wonderful little twist that you don't really see coming unless, of course, you've seen the movie before. But yeah, I really enjoyed Last Man on Earth. It was one that I'd been meaning to check out for a while. Because I had seen the Omega Man many years before, and then I had seen I Am Legend in the theater, and then again on Blu-ray. But I had never seen Last Man on Earth. And I mean, I'm a huge fan of Vincent Price. I mean, if Vincent Price is in something, I'm sold. I want to see it, whatever it is. So I just think he's one of the all-time great horror and sci-fi actors. I mean, because he's one of those actors who could play pretty much any kind of part. He could play a just scary villain. He could play, as in this movie, kind of a tragic hero in a lot of ways. Very sympathetic, very very tragic. What can I say? So I really enjoyed Last Man on Earth. Basically, it's the story of a plague that has wiped out most of the population of the Earth. He's the last survivor that he knows of who is uninfected, because he's immune, and was actually working on a cure for the plague when it was first spreading and whatnot. And and it basically goes into the backstory as well of all the people that he knew that he lost to the plague, or that were changed by it. A lot of people have become essentially zombies, vampire zombies, as a result of the plague. Like, they've died and come back because of the virus. So it's also a very early zombie movie in that respect as well. Now, the original story is supposed to be vampires, and there's actually a really good interview with Richard Matheson on this edition, where he talks about the original story and the first film adaptation and whatnot, and the things that he liked about it, the things that he didn't like about it. Apparently, he did actually originally write the screenplay for the film, and then the studio made some changes and such that, some of which he didn't really care for, but what else is new, right? I mean, he just kind of seems to pass it off as, it's, just kind of Hollywood being Hollywood. But overall, he's pleased with the reception that the film has had, and the fact that the story itself has endured for so many years, and that they've adapted it so many times over the years, because, I mean, that to him means it's a successful story. People want to keep coming back to it and such, so he definitely considers it a success and enjoys that. So in the interview, he talks about how he essentially wanted to do a vampire story, but he always felt that, there were so many vampire stories out there where there was just one vampire, and that was scary. So he thought, like, well, what if there was a whole bunch of vampires? That would be even scarier. So if one vampire was scary, a bunch of vampires would be even more scary. So he took that concept, and in sort of John Wyndham fashion, mixed it in with a post-apocalypse kind of story, which is a pretty cool idea, and it actually works really well. So we've seen a lot of zombie apocalypse movies and such since, obviously, but Last Man on Earth is one of the first, one of the very first. I mean, it's right from around the same time that the original Night of the Living Dead came out. In fact, when was the original Night of the Living Dead? The original Night of the Living Dead was 1968. So actually, Last Man on Earth predates Night of the Living Dead by about, 4 years? Something like that? 4 years, yeah. Last Man on Earth is 1964, so I guess in many ways it could be considered the first sort of modern zombie film. Interesting. So yeah, if you're a zombie fan, if you're a vampire fan, if you're a Vincent Price fan, if you're an I Am Legend fan, if you're just a classic black and white horror movie fan, check out Last Man on Earth. I don't think you'll be disappointed. It's very, very good, and Vincent Price's performance is certainly a large part of that. And it's good stuff. Definitely recommend it. There's also, I should mention, there's a ton of public domain prints of it available. In fact, I think if you go onto archive.org, you can find a version that you can just download and watch legally for free. But if you want the best quality print of it, obviously you want to go with a studio release like this, because MGM does actually own the movie, and they, their quality, the quality of their print is obviously going to be a lot better than any public domain print out there. But if you just want to check out the movie, there's plenty of public domain prints and bargain bin release versions that you can check out. Just make sure you get the widescreen versions. I think there's a few full screen versions floating around out there as well, because it is CinemaScope aspect ratio. So if you get the full screen version, you're losing about half the picture, and there is some pretty nice cinematography in particular the vistas of the dead city and whatnot. The Omega Man is, it maintains a lot of the core elements and so forth, but there it is a little bit cheesier in some respects. But overall, I mean, it definitely has the same kind of flavor to it. But it's basically Charlton Heston kicking a lot of zombie ass. So how can you go wrong there? Yeah, it's a lot of fun as well. So I mean, if you like Last Man on Earth, definitely check out the Omega Man as well, because it's the same story told in a different kind of way. It's a little more action oriented than Last Man on Earth was, and there's some great dialogue as well. One thing that they do a lot of in the Omega Man is get more into, with Last Man on Earth. A lot of it is you get a lot of inner dialogue from Vincent Price's character, just sort of his thoughts made verbalized for us. Whereas with the Omega Man, it gets more into his loneliness and his need for companionship. He has this bust of Caesar that he's playing chess with all the time and talking to and having conversations with, and he comes across almost as a little bit more crazy in that, like outwardly crazy, just from the loneliness and such. You do get some of that in the Vincent Price version as well, but told in a different way. There's no bust of Caesar and such. So they have taken a little bit more creative license with the Omega Man, but it definitely makes for an entertaining film, and I definitely recommend both of them. They're a lot of fun. Maybe a nice double bill one night. Now, the other movie on this set is an even earlier example of post-apocalyptic speculative fiction, namely Panic in Year Zero. And in this case, we have an early attempt to sort of show the aftermath of a nuclear holocaust in a logical, well thought out, realistic fashion. Now that said, it does have a cheese factor to it. For example, my friends and I watched this together, and one of the things we commented on was the fact that the soundtrack is composed almost entirely of smooth jazz. Now, normally you wouldn't think. I mean, it's fun music, it's great, but I mean, there's like a sort of mild rape scene in it, and there's this smooth jazz playing throughout the rape scene. It makes it kind of more disturbing. I mean, this is a movie of 1962. It's more just kind of, a couple guys tossing a girl back and forth. There's no real, this isn't like Last House on the Left or anything where it's a graphic scene that's going to stay with you forever. No, it's almost laughably cheesy, this rape scene, more implied than anything else. But you just kind of got to get into the headspace of the movie and realize the time period when it came out, they couldn't really push the envelope too much. It wasn't until 10 years later, when we got into the early 70s, the movies really started to push the envelope more in terms of graphic content. But for what it is, the thing I liked about Panic in Year Zero is that it takes a very matter-of-fact approach. It's basically about a family going on a fishing trip, and as they're from LA, and as they're leaving the city, some unknown enemy. I don't think they actually name what country it was that was the enemy, but just some country that had it in for America basically drops a bunch of bombs on LA, and like nuclear bombs on LA, and just wipes out the city. So because they were on their way to a fishing trip, they're way outside the city, so they're able to escape annihilation essentially. And then from there it's basically about them trying to survive, trying to cope, trying to quickly stock up on supplies as they're heading into the woods, before everybody else trying to escape the city does the same thing and just kind of overwhelms everything. But it does show in fairly tame by today's standards. It does show the sort of how quickly society breaks down in that type of situation. And in this case, it focuses on this family, featuring a young Frankie Avalon, by the way, as the elder son of the family. Kind of helps the dad, and the women do women things. I mean, this is the early 60s after all. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I mean, it basically shows sort of the collapse of civilization in a fairly tame fashion, but it's the first attempt that they ever really did to sort of show the effects of that type of situation realistically. Nowadays, something like that would be done much more gritty and dark and intense and emotionally overwhelming, but In this one, it's more kind of a matter-of-fact approach where it's like, okay, well, we got to get into the woods and get, proper shelter to avoid fallout contamination, and we got to get lots of food and stuff like that, and get guns and ammo because people are going to try to take our food. Money's not going to mean anything anymore. It's all going to be about food. Let's get a bunch of candy bars so we'll be able to barter and stuff like that, because candy bars will be a rare item. It'll be more, more valuable than money. And so it's good. There is a lot of logical thinking in it that I really dug, and I definitely appreciate it for what it is. Basically, just a first attempt to do this type of subject matter. Because at the time, obviously, there was still a lot of post-apocalyptic movies, but they were all kind of B movies and cheesy, and not really taken seriously. But Panic at Year Zero, despite the B movie sounding title, actually is a pretty serious attempt to do the subject matter in a serious way. So that's pretty cool. Now, finally, the last movie that I watched recently was one that I hadn't watched for probably about 6 or 7 years. But it's the kind of movie that just sticks with you forever. I cannot show it to you here because it's not actually available on DVD. It did have a VHS release back in the mid-'80s. I believe it's been released on DVD in the UK. But I have never seen it on DVD here, which is unfortunate because it's a really outstanding film. Easily the single most disturbing film I have ever seen on the subject of what would happen to civilization after a nuclear apocalypse. The movie is entitled Threads, and the concept behind the title is that everything is connected, that it basically takes the butterfly effect to the nth degree. It's like, well, what if all these bombs dropped on all these major cities, and what effect would that have on civilization? So they get into all kinds of things. The first 30, 40 minutes of it is basically about just sort of the working class in Sheffield, which is like a working class city in the UK. And it's just kind of them going about their daily lives and such, and just kind of the little things that we worry about on a daily basis in our modern society. And in the meantime, we get little flashes of news and stuff. It's done in almost a pseudo-documentary style. There is a narrator that pops on from time to time to explain certain things and to give you a little bit of background information. There is a lot of text that comes up on screen to sort of explain the political situation within the story and what's going on. So basically what it is it's... this film came out in 1984 originally, which was at the height of Cold War paranoia. A lot of U.S. yelling at Russia and Russia yelling at the U.S., and both being the biggest superpowers in the world at the time. Huge nuclear arsenals on both sides. As someone who grew up in that era, I can attest to the fact that basically all of us were in constant fear of being nuked off the face of the planet. So, in the midst of this fear and paranoia, Threads came out. There was another movie. There was an American movie that came out around the same time called The Day After. I have not seen that one. But I remember they both came out on video around the same time, and my friends kept saying, like, yeah, if The Day After is pretty disturbing, but you got to see Threads. Threads is, like, so much worse. And I was like, okay, cool. And then I'd heard about it, and then it just kind of dropped off the radar for a while, and then I remembered it years later, and then looked around for it, couldn't find it, so I ended up downloading a copy because it just is not available, because I really wanted to see it. So if I ever come across the UK DVD release, I will definitely pick that up, or even the old VHS release from here. But the thing that gets me about Threads is it's the kind of movie that, if Panic at Year Zero was the first attempt to sort of show the effects of a nuclear holocaust realistically, Threads is the one that really gets it right. If you look at the credits at the end of the movie, they consulted so many doctors and scientists and stuff to get the facts as accurate as they possibly could. To some extent, it has to be speculative, but speculative based on established fact. Obviously, we know the effects of radiation and what nuclear warfare can do to a civilization based on Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and the various nuclear tests over the years and things like that. So we know a fair amount about what the effects would be biologically and in terms of the society and whatnot. Japan has been feeling the aftermath of that whole thing for decades. When you look at a lot of Japan's fiction, a lot of it is to do with the end of the world. You know, I mean, it's very much a post-apocalypse society in that respect, in that a lot of their fiction is based around that concept, and you know, what happens after, and how do they survive, and things like that. But getting back to Threads basically takes that and throws it into the UK. It says, okay, well, what would happen if it happened in just and then they focus on just the working class city of Sheffield to basically show like how would this affect just normal day-to-day people and their lives and stuff like that. So it focuses on a few families, a few people, and sort of shows the effects over the course of like 15 years from the time shortly before the bombs drop to 15 years later. So it covers a very wide range of years, and it gives you a lot of information over the course of it. And some of the imagery in it is so powerful and so disturbing that I guarantee you will never, ever forget it. It is not a movie for the faint of heart. It is not a movie for people who... It's not that it's overly graphic or anything like that. It's not like a horror style graphicness. It's just the realism of it, and the realization that this is something that could conceivably happen given the right political circumstances. That's what makes it scary. And when you actually see how everything is portrayed and visualized, and see the impact, and there's like just powerful emotions in this film. I mean, when you see just how it affects everybody's lives, and later in the movie how you see how quickly civilization collapses. Because I mean, with nuclear annihilation, it's not just a matter of blowing up the buildings and such. It's basically wiping out the whole infrastructure of civilization. I mean, power is gone, sanitation is gone, running water is gone, government is in a shambles, education gone, because all you're focusing on is surviving, and surviving is even difficult because nuclear bombs basically wipe out the fertilization of the soil. So you have this sterile soil you're trying to grow crops in. The ozone layer is wiped out, and you got radiation, but you also got UV issues. So crops won't grow, and there's mutations in... I'm not talking like fish gills and stuff, but like deformities and mental handicapness for handicapness, not even a word, but you know what I mean, for children and whatnot. And the lack of, and the focus on survival means education takes a nosedive, and you're basically 2 generations away from being savages, because there's no time for proper education for the youth of those in that situation. And you see that in this movie. It shows you the whole sequence of events, and it makes scary sense. So yeah, Threads, definitely check it out if you want to see what nuclear annihilation would do to civilization, because it shows it probably better than any other film that has ever been done before. It is fantastic and dark and disturbing, and it will give you fucking nightmares forever. Enjoy! Alrighty, well, 4 movies for the price of 1. How's that for a bargain? Alrighty, so yeah, we'll see you next time. So until then, happy dreams! And yeah, we'll talk to you next time. So until then, thanks for watching, and sayonara. Welcome back. Well, I have touched on I Am Legend before. I did a review of the deluxe Blu-ray set of the Will Smith version a while back, and... Welcome back. Well, I guess first off, we'll...